on Sky News Australia. This is the Rita Panahi Show.
Good evening and welcome to the Rita Panahi Show. Coming up tonight, the Victorian government refuses to rule out reparations in its treaty negotiations. Jewish students quitting their University of Melbourne courses in response to heightened anti-Semitism on campus. The great Douglas Murray joins me shortly and he has a message for the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister Penny Wong. You don't want to miss that. That comes after Penny Wong, through her department, endorsed the extraordinary ICC decision to seek the arrest of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Army Horowitz with the latest from the US, and as always, we'll bring you Lefties Losing It. Tonight, it's an ABC and an MSNBC extravaganza.
Stop the hammering out there. Who's got a hammer? Where is it?
I don't know.
Where's the hammer? Is it on the... Go up on the other floor. Somebody go up there and stop the hammering. Stop the hammering.
Joining me now is the Deputy Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs, Daniel Wild. Daniel, let's talk about the Victorian Labor Party. They've been in power for so long, seem so strong, but there's a poll out today in The Age showing that they are no longer heading the Liberals by a wide margin. In fact, they're trailing. This is according to the latest Resolve strategic poll, which shows the Allen government is at 28%, an 11-point decline since Stan Andrews resigned as Premier and Jacinta Allen took over. The coalition sits at 37%. That's a 9-point lead, Dan. If this poll is accurate, then could John Pesutto pull a Stephen Bradbury?
Well, look, I think it's certainly possible the Liberals, Nationals could win. The government is declining and rapidly. And the reason for that is the economic pain that is being inflicted upon Victorians. We know their budget spending has grown at half the rate as the economy, or the economy is half the rate of spending, and that's why debt is going up. Victorians are also, I think, bitterly disappointed at what happened during COVID and the lack of political accountability there. And then it's just becoming a reality that as we see these projects that aren't getting done on time, that are over budget, that businesses are leaving, that the pain is starting to be felt, and that's why the numbers are going down.
And we had Victorians, the majority of them vote no in the race-based referendum, but the state government is pressing ahead with a treaty. And the Herald Sun reports that the Allen government has refused to rule out reparations or giving compulsorily acquired private property to Indigenous groups. Minister for Jobs and Industry, Women and Treaty and First Peoples, Natalie Hutchins, said, after 200 years of colonisation, where this state took away lands in the settlement, murdered people and took away culture and language, we're not going to be ruling anything in or out as we go to the negotiation table in regards to treaty. Dan, I wrote about this in today's Herald Sun. This is the sort of undergraduate neo-Marxist rhetoric you'd expect to hear at a student rally, not coming from a senior minister in a state government.
Well, that's right. Victorians don't want this and Victorians don't support this. As you rightly say, they voted no to the Voice. Nationwide, a 60% no vote, including 40% of Labor voters who voted no. A treaty and potential reparations are far worse than what a Voice would have done.
If we had a referendum on treaty, it wouldn't have got 10%, let alone 39% that the constitutional recognition got. So this is incredible, that the arrogance to press ahead and to have the minister say we're not ruling anything out, not even compulsorily acquired private property being handed over.
Yeah, and what the coalition needs to do at state level is to build upon its growing electoral success, or at least in the polls, by muscling up to this weak, divisive Labor government. I believe only Tim Smith spoke out against the treaty at the time. Now they're opposed to it, but it's gone on for too long. And they really need to speak up on behalf of mainstream Victorians who are saying, I'm going backwards and you're going to be giving massive handouts to one group based on race and won't rule out. Compulsory acquisition is extraordinary.
Oh, absolutely. And we've got so many of these neo-Marxist activists in senior roles in state Labor, people who've never worked outside of the union movement or the Labor Party. And I guess it shouldn't be a surprise we're in the sort of debt that we're in this state, record amounts of debt. And Vic Labor are also losing favour with frontline workers. They cheered on so enthusiastically during the record-breaking lockdowns we had here. The state can't afford pay rises demanded by nurses, paramedics, police, teachers and firefighters. Dan, we've got more than 250,000 workers who are effectively at war with the Allen government right now.
Well, look, this is what happens when the economy goes down. You can't pay your bills. And now we're starting to see that. We all knew this day was going to come. We've been saying for years that there will come a point where the Victorian government cannot afford to deliver the services that Victorians need. We are now seeing that, and these are the real-world consequences of fiscal and economic mismanagement. It's not just numbers on a page. It's not just the borrowing costs. We know the interest payments on debt are by far the fastest-growing item of Victorian government spending. That's also true at a federal level, but we're now seeing, as I say, the results of this dramatic economic mismanagement. And look, this is the canary in the coal mine, and it's going to get worse.
To Queensland now, Premier Stephen Miles is insisting migration is to blame for road congestion and public transport woes in his state. He has doubled down on his calls for the federal government to slash overseas migration numbers by half. He's copped a bit of criticism over this, Dan, but I wonder if he does have a point. State government analysis has found that net overseas migration contributed a 177% increase in trips on Queensland's transport network. So we had 60,000 trips in 2019 to 167,000 trips last year. 120,000 people moved to Queensland last year, and 88,000 of them were overseas migrants.
Yeah, look, the Premier of Queensland is spot on. He's right to point out that many of the problems we have, whether it's housing, whether it's the congestion on our roads, pressure on social services, is from the massive increase to demand from this unplanned mass migration. You know things are bad when even a Labor Premier is calling out his federal colleagues on their failed migration program.
There is an election around the corner. That may have something to do with it.
And you make a really good point, because I've got to say, those are the words of a man who wants to win. He is willing, he's wedged the coalition there on, or the LNP, on net zero, and the LNP went along with it. He's now wedging them on the migration issue. So, look, I think it's probably back to even Stevens in terms of that election.
Oh, he has played it very well indeed. And the LNP, that massive own goal by signing up to Labor's bold emission targets, now they've really taken out that issue, cost of living, energy policy out of the equation.
Yep.
And he seems to be coming in stronger than even they are on something that people care passionately about, and that's migration numbers, even though it's a federal issue, not a state issue. Now, an increasing number of Jewish students at the University of Melbourne are dropping out, deferring placement, or fleeing campus altogether as pro-Palestinian activists continue to occupy buildings on the Parkville campus. The Arts West building has been occupied for over a week now by students who are refusing to move. They've even renamed it Mahmoud Hall after a Gaza victim. They disrupt classes for 17,000 students. What action is the university taking, Dan, to restore order here? It seems to be very little indeed.
Very little. They're allowing it to happen. They've given in to the worst of the campus protests. Students, I mean, you talk to students that they can't go to class, they can't study. I mean, some of them are trying to do exams. They can't go to the library and study because they're all outside chanting. So how come these students are paying thousands and thousands of dollars and they're not even receiving an education? The universities need to be rebating the students who can't go to class. It's a complete disgrace. And the other point to make here is, of course, you can have your say, but this is a university. You're there to be educated. You're there to learn. And it's just...
This has gone far beyond a protest. They've got camps set up. I mean, surely that's against the rules and regulations.
I'm sure they are, but clear them out. How hard is it for them to clear them out? But this is the point, Rita. These universities and the Vice-Chancellors lack moral courage. They will not do it. They'll take in the international students for the money. They're diminishing the quality of education, and they won't stand up to this bullying behaviour. They are, as a cohort, a disgrace.
Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Let's bring in Douglas Murray, best-selling author of The Strange Death of Europe, The Madness of Crowds, and his latest work, The War on the West. Douglas, we'll get to the ICC shortly, but first today we learned through a new court filing that was unsealed today, the Department of Justice authorised the use of deadly force when FBI agents executed a raid at President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence in August 2022. This seems all a bit heavy-handed, Douglas, when looking for classified documents.
Yes. I mean, when this first happened, I said to you, I mean, the best interpretation was that some librarians in the National Archives got cross, but who knew that librarians could send in the gunman? I wonder if the same consideration of lethal force was ever considered when documents needed to be retrieved from President Biden's Chevrolet and his garage and various other places. It just seems extraordinary to me, as I think it will to most viewers. After all, what would the FBI have been expecting? Were they expecting a sort of standoff? Were they expecting to shoot security officers and others who, of course, would surround President Trump at all times anyway, in and out of office? It seems extraordinary to me, and could have been, if it had been followed through on, one of those absolute kerosene on the fire events that everybody in American politics is rightfully fearful of.
Well, yeah, these threats to democracy we keep hearing about. Now, let's go to the ICC. And you warned us about the International Criminal Court and its Chief Prosecutor, Karim Khan, some time ago. And you were right on the money. Khan has now defended his recommendation of arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli Defence Minister. Khan says he took this action because Israeli courts did not appear to be investigating alleged abuse in Gaza.
It's an extraordinary thing. And by the way, anyone interested in dystopias should look at the announcement that this so-called prosecutor Khan made with these two equally nondescript people standing behind him. It looked like a bad 1970s B-movie, BBC made-for-television cop film. People have to remember that the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is simply not what it claims to be. It does not have jurisdiction, and in my view, it should not have jurisdiction. In my view, it should not have jurisdiction over British troops or British politicians, nor should it, in my view, and this is a case for the Australian public, of course, have jurisdiction over Australian soldiers or over Australian politicians. But of course, Israel isn't a signatory to the court, quite rightly, in my view, as this has demonstrated, and nor is America, because America knew from the beginning of this extra-national entity, this supranational entity, that if you allow these nondescript, highly motivated ideologues like so-called prosecutor Khan, they will do all of their hobby horses. I'm fascinated that Khan has immediately decided to go for the Jews. Of course he has. He singled out the one Jewish state in the world and is trying to prosecute its democratically elected leader. This is the first time the International Criminal Court has come for a democratically elected leader. Has Mr. Khan bothered to go for, I don't know, Bashar al-Assad or the supreme leader in Iran who hangs women who've been raped for the crime of being raped? Has he gone for any of them? No, of course not. He's not interested in pursuing all of these Muslim leaders in the Middle East who carry out atrocities day in, day out. No, he's gone for the democratically elected leader of the one Jewish state. He's an ideologue. The court has no jurisdiction over this, and it is simply a smear. And Khan is playing right into the hands of Hamas. Whether he means to do so or not, I suppose it's only for him to say.
Well, we have a list of the experts who back the ICC warrants against Israel. The panel includes international law and human rights expert Danny Friedman, British House of Lords member Helena Kennedy, And British Lebanese barrister and human rights lawyer Amal Clooney, who posted a statement on the website of the Clooney Foundation for Justice. She wrote, "We unanimously conclude that there are reasonable grounds to believe that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity, including starvation as a method of warfare, murder, persecution and extermination. I served on this panel because I believe in the rule of law and the need to protect civilian lives." Douglas, what's your response to that?
These are all more preposterous political ideologues pretending to be cool, level-minded lawyers. Helena Kennedy is a far left-wing career political operative in the UK. She spent her whole life campaigning for loony left causes and giving them some legal patina. Amal Clooney, another highly motivated political operator. In her case, doubtless she will use this to raise more funds for the Clooney Foundation and to burnish her own credentials in some other way. But if you just consider what they've done there, first of all, these preposterous so-called judges and lawyers have done no on-the-ground research, nothing original. They haven't been into Gaza. They haven't been in any of the areas of the fighting. So when they say we find that Benjamin Netanyahu could have overseen murder in a war zone, they don't even know that it has happened. I mean, I suspect there is some killing in a war zone. It strikes me as being kind of de rigueur, and that's why Hamas shouldn't have started a war. But the other thing these people have done is, as I said earlier, Khan decided to go for the one Jewish state in the world. But he waited and did it at the same time as going for, or claiming that he's going to go for, Sinwar, the Hamas leader who planned and organized the 7th of October massacres. So what he's doing is this neat political, I would say even Islamist ideological thing, which is if you can't get through in the way you want, you pretend there is moral parity between Hamas and the IDF, between Sinwar, who planned the 7th of October atrocities, and Benjamin Netanyahu, whose task it is, the unenviable task of getting the hostages home and punishing the leadership of Hamas. They have just drawn an equivalence between those two things. I think it's, as I say, highly motivated, highly political at best. The whole thing stinks of an agenda. And I would just say that everybody who's just stumbled upon the International Criminal Court should remember, again, it isn't what it says it is. It has no jurisdiction in these matters, and nor should it. If it is agreed that these highly motivated individuals can come for Benjamin Netanyahu and the Minister of Defense Gallant, they will be coming for an Australian Prime Minister next, or a British Home Secretary, or an American Secretary of State, and they have no more right there.
You're 100% right there. And the decision to announce this action against the Hamas leadership and the Israeli Prime Minister and Defence Minister on the same day, it is such a clear political move to put them on the same page, as if there is some equivalence there. It's just transparent.
Yeah.
It is, and it's going to work
legally.
Absolutely. Well, this decision by the ICC has been condemned by Israel's strongest allies. We've had the United States come out strongly, the United Kingdom, but sadly, our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has been shamefully weak on this issue, and his Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, I'd argue, has been even worse. Let's hear from the Prime Minister first.
Well, I don't comment on court processes in Australia, let alone court processes globally, which Australia is not a party.
Apparently he can't make any comment on court cases overseas. Just a few minutes later, he made comment on the Julian Assange case, which is happening overseas. So he couldn't even stay consistent there. But his Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, used her department to issue a statement expressing support for the ICC. The statement said Australia respects the ICC and the important role it has in upholding international law. The decision on whether to issue arrest warrants is a matter for the court. Douglas, Australia's response seems not just weak but unprincipled compared to what we've seen from the UK and the US.
Well, first of all, don't be so sure that the US and UK are so principled on this. I think there's a political game going on here, and the Biden administration would be perfectly happy to give over Netanyahu in order to get a preferred candidate. So there's a lot of different types of politics going on. And in the UK, the Labour Party, who are likely to be the overwhelming party of government in Britain later this year, their idiot representative actually welcomed the ruling. So that would be British policy too. As for Albanese and Wong, I mean, they can console themselves, and certainly Wong can console herself, that she is on exactly the same side as Hamas leader Khalid Mashal. Let me just read you quickly what Khalid Mashal said earlier this week in a speech. He said that it's extremely important to annihilate the Zionists for the good of humanity, and that being far away from a zone of jihad does not mean that you are absolved from carrying out jihad. He says that the Al-Aqsa flood, which is what he and his friends in Hamas call the 7th of October massacre, he said the Al-Aqsa flood must be followed by, and has been followed by, quote, the great student flood. All of those students on Western campuses, they're doing what the head of Hamas is wanting them to do. He said we need a media flood. Well, Khalid Mashal's got the media flood all the way from the New York Times to Al Jazeera. He says then we need a legal flood, such as the incidents and the attempts to use The Hague. He's also said, of course, that we need jihad and resistance and a jihad flood. So Wong can console herself, like all of those wrong-headed students on various campuses who've made common cause with Hamas. They're on exactly the same page, lockstep with one of the people who planned the 7th of October massacre. I hope they're proud of themselves. History will be horrible to them.
Well, on those wrong-headed students, we've seen them across university campuses in the US, UK, right here in Australia. They'd be feeling even more emboldened by this decision by the ICC. And I wonder if it'll be enough to see them remove their masks, Douglas. You wrote about this trend of anti-Israeli protesters wearing masks outdoors, and you've called on these cowards to show their faces.
Yes, it was fascinating to me, Rita. When I was in Australia recently, I noticed that all the anti-Israel protesters all seemed to be, whilst they were doing their thing of celebrating Hamas, they seemed also to be incredibly scared of COVID. Rita, very 2020. Here in New York, up at Columbia, all these students who are shouting things like "Go back to Poland" to the Jewish students at Columbia, they're also terrified of respiratory viruses. Very interesting. Same thing in the UK, where the brave students at Cambridge University shout their filth and also shout it through masks. Now, I suggest this is all bunk. They're not actually afraid of COVID whilst they're doing their bit for Hamas. They know that what they're doing might be shameful. They know it might get them into trouble. They know that when you stand among a group of people all wearing their Yasser Arafat kaffirs and feeling so proud of dressing up in Hamas terrorist chic, they sort of sense maybe at some point in the future, this will go wrong and I might have to account for my presence here and my actions. So what do? I go all 2020 and I put a mask on. And the authorities, in my view, and everyone else should say, in America in particular, the last group of racists who were allowed to parade through America with their faces covered were the Ku Klux Klan. Now, people used to say then, if you're so proud of your racist ideology, why don't you show your face? And it's the same thing with these students and others. I'd like them to show their faces. I show my face when I speak. You show your face, Rita. We're not afraid of being held to account for our opinions. We put them out there like anyone else who's sensible, and we expect to be held to account for them. These people do not. They are acting simultaneously as radicals and cowards. It's not surprising those two things often go together, but I'd say to them, to use a phrase that might trigger them, man up, guys. Show your face. Let the world see the bigotry face to face.
Well, I saw some of them when they were arrested. I think it was UCLA, it was some university campus where the police made a point after they put them in handcuffs to remove their masks. And they did not seem to enjoy that at all. Now, to the UK quickly, where the Times is reporting that police are being told to make fewer arrests because of the lack of space in prisons. Yes, chief constables are being advised to consider pausing non-priority arrests and also suspend operations that may trigger large number of arrests until there is enough capacity in the prison system. What could go wrong with that, Douglas?
I have to say, the UK police advice is late. The UK police don't bother arresting anyone anyway. I mean, unless obviously, for instance, you've tweeted something out about a trans child perhaps not being operated on and molested by pervy surgeons. But, you know, if you have your house robbed, and I mentioned this to you before, Rita, half the police forces in England and Wales haven't made one arrest in recent years for burglary, not one.
True.
So actually, this advice, and it's always the most ridiculous advice, that, you know, we're running out of prison places, so let's just arrest fewer criminals, as opposed to we will build as many prison places as there are criminals who need to go into them. No, they're worried about the number of people in prisons, and they don't need to worry. The way that the police in Britain are going, the prisons may be filled with tweet crime people, but there won't be any burglars. And of course, as we know from Sadiq Khan's London, there aren't any stabbers or murderers. So actually, I'm amazed there's any shortage of prison spaces. I'd have thought that if you did have the bad luck to be locked up in Chokey in the UK these days, you'd be able to effectively hot desk it among the cells. You'd probably have your choice of cell because most of them are empty because the police can't arrest anyone for any actual crime. Haven't bothered in years.
Now, before you go, I want to get your opinion on this new therapy craze that seems to be very popular with some women who are going to the woods and just scream and bash the ground with sticks. It's called rage therapy. These rage ritual therapies can be a costly affair. If you want the full package, it can cost upwards of $4,000. Money well spent, Douglas?
I mean, it struck me that a few of them just ought to take it out by going to the gym. It'll be cheaper and necessary. Not to want to body shame anyone, but there's something just. It's a sort of civilizational breakdown thing. This. You know, we have somebody there saying they feel sad and another one feels afraid. I hate to break it to them, but if any of them are watching, human life is sad. It is also joyful. You are sometimes going to be afraid in your life, and sometimes you won't be. You might even be brave. Human life, one of the great things about it is it's filled with lots of emotions. But in general, it's a good idea to keep them in check and keep yourself sane. And one of the ways in which you can tell that you're not being sane is when you're standing in the middle of a wood being rinsed for $4,000 by some charlatan, smashing the ground and screaming. That's a sign that you've not got it together, and an overpriced stick beating on the ground session ain't going to help you. I would argue all sorts of other things could, but these are just people whose lives are not together. I wish them luck, but this isn't going to put it together. They are going to have to do a lot more work than this, Rita.
Yes, but at least they're outdoors in the woods getting some fresh air. Let's look at the positive side. Douglas Murray, thank you so much.
At least they're not online, Rita. At least they're not online screaming like that, as many people are. At least they're doing it in the woods, offline.
Precisely. Thank you, Douglas Murray.
Thank you.
Still to come, a special ABC MSNBC edition of Lefties Losing It, and Army Horowitz joins me with the latest from the US. You will not believe what the judge in the Trump trial has done now. Welcome back. Now it's time for Lefties Losing It, and the ladies of The View are the gift that keeps on giving. So much Lefties Losing It content each and every week, and today it's the ironically named Joy Behar who stars with this bit of derangement.
You keep wearing that red hat that says "Make America Great Again." That tells people that you go along with this. So you might as well just put a swastika on the hat.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Because we see it anyway.
Yep, she's bonkers and devoid of joy. Can you imagine becoming so unhinged by a Making America Great Again cap? And we have more joy for you, not real joy, the bitter lefty losing it type here, admitting that she's not honest with her audience about Joe Biden's failings because she doesn't want to help Donald Trump.
So, but I'm nervous about saying anything against Biden because I feel, not that I have so much power, and you have some more than I do, obviously. But
I don't know about that.
Are you afraid that you might, influence people who are on the fence?
I think you lose all credibility. I do. I mean, my bond with my audience has always been I don't pull a punch.
Yeah.
My bond with my audience is you're not going to like everything I say, but I'm saying what I really think is true.
Oh, that was some subtle shade thrown by Ma. And that wasn't the worst of it. Here, Joy claims that Biden's brain is still good. He's great.
We are not young, but we don't present as old.
Yeah.
Biden does. I saw him yesterday making that speech.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. He's cadaver-like.
But his brain is good. He's still great.
Oh, that is just unintentionally hilarious. And now to more unintentional hilarity from the male version of Joy Behar, MSNBC host Lawrence O'Donnell. He had this analysis on Michael Cohen's disastrous testimony where the serial perjurer admitted to being a thief who stole $30,000 from the Trump Organization.
That yes, he stole $30,000. Later, when Cohen was asked about that on redirect by the prosecution, it didn't really sound like stealing $30,000. It sounded a lot like Michael Cohen doing the little that he could within that calculation to rebalance the bonus he thought he deserved, and it still came out as less than the bonus he thought he deserved.
Did you get that? So if you think you're entitled to something, you can just take it. That's not really stealing. Yeah, Lawrence actually said it sounded like Cohen doing what he could to rebalance the bonus he thought he deserved. Yeah, okay. Lefty's losing it indeed. And it's not the first time Lawrence has embarrassed himself reporting on this trial. Remember his bizarre, creepy description of Stormy Daniels?
At 10:32 a.m., she entered wearing all black, as if on her way to a funeral. The loose-fitting, plain black clothing draping from her shoulders to her toes suggested the modesty of a nun. The makeup was minimal, the way she and the other moms in her neighborhood might look when shopping at the local grocery store. The long blonde hair held up with a clip at the back of her head, the way it might be in a utilitarian way while she was doing dishes or checking one of the horseshoes on her horse.
Checking horseshoes, the modesty of a nun, Stormy Daniels, really this bizarre and creepy. I think I was underselling it with that. But the best Lawrence clip of all time, if you ask me, is from when Trump was president and MSNBC was extra crazy. Enjoy this leaked footage where he's sure he can hear a hammer no one else can hear, and it makes him very angry indeed.
James Fallows and Josh Earnest, thank you both for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Coming up, is Donald Trump going to be called to testify to Congress? Michael Liskoff has the latest on that. Stop the hammering. Stop the hammering out there. Who's got a hammer? Where is it?
I don't know.
Where's the hammer?
It's on a different.
Is it on the? Go up on the other floor. Somebody go up there and stop the hammering. Stop the hammering. I'll go down to the goddamn floor myself and stop it. Keep the goddamn commercial break going. Call Phil Griffin. I don't care who the you have to call. Stop the hammering. Empty out the goddamn control room and find out where this is going on. It's either there or out there somewhere.
He seems agitated, but it wasn't just the hammering. There's also a woman talking about Labor Day in his ear incessantly.
The woman talking in my ear was talking about the Labor Day special repeatedly every time we went to a SOT.
Out of control.
Joining me now is filmmaker and journalist Ami Horowitz. Ami, the Biden administration has set records for illegal immigration, losing complete control of that southern border. We've talked about it often. And that crisis is set to worsen with illegal migrants using what could be the final months of Biden's presidency to rush across the border before a second Trump term. Two Colombian illegal migrants who crossed the border in Arizona last week told the New York Post that they fear the election will make border crossings harder, saying, "We don't want Trump." That speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it says everything about where we are and where the election is going, frankly. I mean, look, I've been to the border, unlike Kamala Harris, and I've spoken to the migrants coming across, and they don't hide the fact. They don't hide the ball. They say, look, we're here because we know we can get in under the Biden administration. We didn't come under the Trump administration because we couldn't get in. It's as simple as that, Rita. But this administration is so bad at this. Never mind the demographic consequences, the economic consequences to the U.S. of having 7 million people cross the border illegally, just from an electoral standpoint, just from the fact that this is the #2 issue in our country, you're really going to fail at that, knowing that it is going to cost you the election. Biden is so bad. And I've said it before, hats off to the Texas governor, the Florida governor, who at the time was just political theater when they took the migrants and they shipped them to blue states and blue cities across the country, turned out to be an absolute massive win politically because it had actually turned the tide of people who live in these big cities who are now saying we cannot deal with this problem. It is absolute brilliance, and this topic, along with inflation, is going to sink the Biden administration.
Yes, all those sanctuary cities where they don't want to provide sanctuary to illegal immigrants anymore. They love to have that title, but they don't want to actually put it into practice. Now, to Donald Trump's trial in Manhattan, he's not going to be testifying in this criminal trial. And it comes as Alan Dershowitz writes in the New York Post. Just when I thought this case couldn't be any more bizarre, I read this piece. He said there's never been such a spectacle as this hush money criminal trial against Trump. At one point in the trial, Judge Merchant cleared out the courtroom after a witness for the defence, Robert Costello, raised his eyebrows at one of his rulings. Dershowitz wrote, "For some reason, I was allowed to stay, and I observed one of the most remarkable wrong-headed biases I have ever seen. The judge actually threatened to strike all of Costello's testimony if he raised his eyebrows again." I mean, just when you think this case couldn't be any more crazy or corrupt, you read something like that.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. I think the issue, at least for me, I think the biggest issue is the contrasting coverage of what's going on. Now, the problem is it's not being televised, okay? So it's not being televised. Really, you're just at the whim of the biased interpreters of what they are watching. So if you're watching and I've watched both. If you watch CNN, for example, you think that the prosecution is destroying the defense and that Trump is 100% going to be prosecuted. If you watch Fox News, it's the exact opposite. They're saying there's no question Trump is going to be acquitted. They look at a guy like the Judge Merchan. If you watch CNN, he's the greatest judge we've ever seen. If you watch Fox News, he's totally biased. We don't know because we can't watch this ourselves. Now, I will tell you this. I know I'm not a lawyer, but I'm playing one on Sky News. One thing you don't want to do is you don't want to demonize the judge when you're not really playing to the court of public opinion, you're playing to the jurors themselves. The one thing I have been a juror, and the one thing I can tell you is that the jurors have a special connection to the judge. They're not thinking about politics. What they know is he was there when they were first chosen. He was there when he walked them through the process. He's there when they have lunch. They have a deep connection with it. They don't like when the prosecution continuously attacks the judge. So I think that is a tactical mistake. But the worst part is we just don't. Most people don't know.
This jury and judge do share a deep connection. It's a hatred of Donald Trump. I mean, please, let's not pretend that this is some sort of unbiased trial in an unbiased territory. This is deep Democrat territory where the jury pool comes from a very Democrat voting base, and we've seen just the elements of this trial that are unlike anything else legal experts who observe these things for years have seen. So I take your point about the different coverage, but I would argue that most conservatives expect to see a conviction in this case, but they don't see it that way because they think Donald Trump's getting a fair trial. They see it because it seems to be almost predetermined, but then it will be appealed and probably overturned at some later date. But I want to get your response to this next issue, Army. Tell me about the reaction we've seen to the Biden White House offering its condolences to the butcher of Tehran, Ibrahim Raisi, who died in a helicopter crash earlier this week. Just the moral decay that would see an administration offer condolences to this monster who tortured pregnant women and slaughtered thousands of innocent people. Has there been much backlash, or are we used to this sort of degeneracy now?
Yeah, I think it bears repeating. He's called the butcher of Tehran for a reason, not just what you just mentioned before that he's done and the tens of thousands of people he killed and tortured. But I want to point out that one particular thing he did that was of particular deviousness is that before he murdered some very young women who were virgins, and since there is a prohibition against killing a virgin, the girls would be raped before they were hung so they could legally be killed. This is the kind of deviant monster we're talking about. And first, let me talk about the UN real quick, another cesspool of deviancy where they lowered the flag to half-mast, and they had a moment of silence for this animal. They didn't have a moment of silence for the 1,200 Israelis who were raped and murdered on October 7th, but they did for the Iranian president. Now, you expect that from the UN. I covered the UN for 5 years. I know how disgusting that place is, the moral equivalency, the lack of morals when it comes to that place. But like you said, to have the State Department and by extension, the Biden administration put out their condolences, I don't know what they're playing at. I don't know what the point is. I don't even know why they would do that. The only thing I can think about is this bizarre notion that we have to befriend our enemies so they can understand that we're not the bad guys. We're not the guys you should be going after. Go after the other people. That's the only way I can rationalize this. Of course, look, you could look at the Biden. Now, I will say this, at least the Biden administration showed outrage for the ICC ruling against Israel. But the ICC ruling happened not in small part because the Biden administration publicly said that Israel was going after and targeting civilians and banned weapons. If you don't think that played a role in that, you're crazy. So I think all of this is kind of coming together and coalescing, and it to the point where we're actually having a moment of silence for a depraved human being like the former president, thankfully, of Iran.
Yes, I think a lot of people watched that at the UN and their first thought was, let's defund the UN, let's get out of there. Horowitz, thank you so much for your time this evening. Still to come, Iran sentences a musician to death for taking a stand against the brutal Islamist regime. Human Khalili joins me next. Welcome back. My next guest is on a mission to unite the women protesting against the Iranian regime with the Jewish people of Israel through art. Human Khalili has designed 11 murals in Israel and 2 in the US in support of the Women Life Freedom movement in Iran that started after the death of Mahsa Amini at the hands of the state's morality police. Likening the female protesters to the Hebrew heroine Esther, Khalili is hoping to show those fighting for freedom and liberty in Iran that the Jewish people stand with them. Human Khalili joins me now. What inspired you to undertake this project and to unite these two people whose countries are effectively at war?
Thank you, Rita, for having me. I'm really honored to be here. Yeah, when this revolution started September 16th, 2022, I was watching it from a distance. I'm a filmmaker. The idea of creating murals was brought to me. I helped birth a mural in San Francisco because of the picture going viral on Instagram. The former vice president of Jerusalem found me, Fleur Hassan, and another really prominent Israeli, Emily Schrader, and they said, listen, we want murals in support of the Iranian women here in Israel. We want to show the world that we Jews are standing with the freedom-fighting women of Iran. So I, being raised in church, loving Jesus, I thought, God, I think you're calling. So I jumped on a plane, met with Fleur Hassan. We had a quick conversation, and miraculously, 26 days later, the first mural was born in Jerusalem. And when that mural went up on January 9th, 2023, for one day, the eyes of the world came upon Israel, and Israel had the very best press. Everybody loved the state of Israel on January 9th because that was the first mural in the Middle East in support of the freedom-fighting women of Iran.
Now, your latest mural honours rapper Tumaj Salehi, who has been sentenced to death by the Iranian Revolutionary Court on charges they accuse him of corruption on earth. What he actually did was protest against the Iranian regime. He took a stand with the women of Iran. He's reportedly been tortured and now faces a death sentence. Is there any hope that international attention and pressure can save him?
Yeah, that's a great question. Tumaj is arguably the most famous musician in all of Iran right now. You've got Coldplay reaching out to the international community. You most recently had Sting. And this man is such a person of principle. He won't concede to the demands of the Islamic regime. He is holding his hard-line stance, criticizing them. Once again, Emily Schrader called and said, it's time to do a mural of Tumaj here in Israel. Once again, the state of Israel said, please come, do this mural here. And so the only 2 murals I know of Tumaj in the world are in the state of Israel. Once again, Israel is saying, look, we are standing with even during a time of war, we are standing with the freedom-fighting women and the freedom-fighting people of Iran. And, this opens up a wider question, which is, when you look at the murals of the world in support, the Woman Life Freedom murals, you've got many in the United States, many in Australia, Europe, Canada, but the only country in the Middle East standing with the freedom-fighting women of Iran is Israel. To date, there are no murals in Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Qatar, Lebanon, UAE, Saudi Arabia. I cannot understand this unbelievable criticism for Israel when Israel is saying, we love the Persian people. Even during a time of war, we are standing with the women of Iran.
You know what? And we've seen similar sentiments from young people in Iran. I've seen footage of students refusing to walk on the Israeli and American flags that the regime paints that they're supposed to stomp on. They make an effort to walk around them. So there is this goodwill amongst the populations. Your work is beautiful. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
My pleasure. And one last thing, 95% of the people in Iran stand with the state of Israel. And that is a beautiful thing.
That's it from me. Up next is Newsnight. I'll see you at 11 tomorrow. Good night.